America, America, make God thy gold refined, till all success be nobleness, and ever again divine. And you know, when I was in school, we used to sing it something like this. Listen here. Oh, beautiful, far spacious skies.
Hello, and welcome back to Wayland Weekly Buzz. I'm your host, Susan Wagner. Our spotlight this week is on the Petitioner's article for an alternative playing field at the Loker Conservation and Recreation area. We'll be talking to John Sachs, the lead petitioner for the article, coming up at November's special town meeting. He's proposing to build a smaller natural grass field at the Loker area instead of an artificial turf field. John is a resident of the Willowbrook community directly opposite the Loker site to the south. He and other residents of the surrounding area have been vocal in their concerns about the scope of the field being promoted by the Recreation Commission. We'll have that interview right after these town government committee reports. We begin with the selectmen. In a session that was scheduled to last 40 minutes but went on for more than 2 hours, the selectmen on Monday night reviewed appeals from residents whose privately owned roads or shared driveways have been recommended for discontinued plowing by the Department of Public Works. Some have been unsettled by the town's 2015 decision to discontinue free plowing of certain homes with privately owned shared driveways. Earlier this year, in an effort to address these concerns, the selectmen and the Board of Public Works established a policy defining which roads are open to public use. The selectmen reviewed the definition of public use, which means that the private road is actually open to use by the public for purposes of travel, not merely incidental to its use by permission of the owner or owners. An appeals process was established during the summer. On Monday night, the board went over 21 appeals involving 12 roads and heard from the affected residents. Asserting that the appeals had not provided any new information that would encourage them to reconsider the vote they took in May on which roads would be plowed and which wouldn't, the board's final disposition was to deny all the appeals for the coming plowing season. The board will review the policy and seek advice from town council, as well as the director of the Department of Public Works. Specifically, they are looking for a definition regarding safe turnarounds, an understanding of how many other shared driveways exist that have never been plowed by the town, a clarification for each private road or driveway on what is the hazard noted by the DPW, and a better understanding of the process for acceptance of roads by the town. To view the entire session, see the Waycam recording on our website, www.waycam.tv, under Government Recordings, from elapsed time 0/21/10 to 2/32/50. Meantime, the school committee devoted most of the time in its 4-hour meeting on Monday night to two main topics: school improvement plans and school start times. The meeting began with a spirited public comment period focused on start times, with a packed house, room full of residents, presenting opinions on both sides of the debate. This was followed by a discussion of goals for each of the district's schools and how they're aligned with the district-wide objectives to elevate achievement and to, quote, notice every student every day, close quote. Administrators from the Children's Way up through the high school all presented their specific focus items and actions they're taking to address their goals. Most of the remaining time was devoted to school start times, with the committee reviewing responses to additional data they had previously requested, and debating the pros and cons of various minor adjustments to the existing scenarios. The committee will host one more meeting with Boston resident parents on November 5th, before returning to the town building on November 19th to complete deliberations and make decision on 2019-20 start times. As for the Finance Committee at their October 22nd meeting, they discussed the capital projects that are on the horizon. Projects totaling $25.3 million have been submitted. These include new construction for a Council on Aging Community Center for $5.6 million, Loker Field, $3.1 million, and the high school athletic complex, $6.7 million, an additional $8.5 million from the general fund and $1.5 million from the water fund. The school business manager and a member of the school committee then presented their fiscal 20 capital requests, which totaled $10.4 million. These included the $6.7 million just mentioned for the high school athletic complex, plus about $3.8 million for 14 other assorted capital projects. The committee requested that the school committee, the Finance Committee requested that the school committee prioritize their capital requests so that the FinCom could make informed recommendations. If all of the proposed projects totaling $25.3 million were funded by debt service at annual town meeting in April 2019, the town would pay approximately $2.5 million in additional debt service. As a note, there is currently a total of about $77 million in capital requests for projects over the next 5 years. And a final item, Finance Committee members expressed concern and frustration with the recent warrant article comment process and asked the chair to draft a memo to the selectmen outlining their concerns. As for the Board of Public Works, along with representatives from the Department of Public Works, the Selectmen, the Wastewater District Management Commission, Finance Committee, and School Department hosted an hour-long discussion on October 23rd to identify the current and long-term issues facing the Wastewater Commission and its customers. Cliff Lewis led the discussion after interviews with various stakeholders. Operational oversight and clerical responsibilities of the Wastewater Commission has placed heavy burdens on the 3 wastewater commissioners. As the town shifts operational oversight for school and town wastewater systems from contractors to the DPW, the Board of Public Works and Wastewater Commission are considering what issues face the Commission and what structural alternatives might exist for board-level oversight. While there were no clear immediate action paths, it was clear that there may be some operational efficiencies that could be gained by combining some of the talents that exist at the town's Department of Public Works with the assorted operational and administrative needs of the various common wastewater systems in the town. It was also evident, based on the level of participation from the cross-section of various attendees, that issues of wastewater touch a large number of functional areas, and that a number of additional steps will be necessary to have a clear, common understanding of just where we are and where we're going in order to determine what might be the best way to approach the entire wastewater issue. Some of the topics touched on were ways to reduce both operational and long-term costs at the processing plant that serves the center of town, whether there are legal obligations and compliance issues, what might be the best ways to address potential emergencies when systems fail or service is interrupted, and do we have an effective approach that would sustain a long-term economic development for the town's major business districts. Over the next few months, the board expects to see more conversations, meetings, and discussions to help gain a clear insight into the direction the town should be moving with regard to wastewater handling. As a second order of business, wireless water meter reading will not be in the fall town meeting special town meeting warrant, due to a selectman's concern based on the finance director and town administrator's model that the water retained earnings account might become too low in future years. The Board of Public Works was concerned that this decision was made late in the game with little opportunity to resolve differences between the finance director's model and the model used by the DPW and the Board of Public Works itself. The Board of Public Works and the town administrator agreed to work together to resolve these differences so the article can come before annual town meeting in the spring. The Board of Public Works voted to delay the purchase of water meters until the annual town meeting decision in an effort to save $330,000 if both the meter and reading devices are installed at the same time. At its meeting on October 26, the Economic Development Committee took up a number of topics. Among them, redevelopment of the corner of Main and East Plain Streets, where the former gas station is for sale, to include the adjoining Honey Farms Liberty Pizza site, and signage, facade improvements, and sidewalks in the commercial area on Route 20 to the west of the historic town center. Meanwhile, and disappointingly, there has been no progress on leasing the former Whole Foods and adjacent storefronts. On a brighter note, a golf simulation pub is scheduled to open at the town center, hopefully later this year. This is something like Wii, I'm told, but with real golf clubs and food and drink on the side. We hope to have a special program devoted to these and other issues of economic concern to the town in the very near future. On to the Council on Aging Community Center Advisory Committee, which has received 5 proposals for the position of Owner's Project Manager and 3 for the designer/architect of the project. It's expected that the committee will review the proposals and vote their choices in the near future to move the project along. The Historical Commission reports that it's involved in archaeological monitoring of the Dudley Woods walking trail. This is because the parcel is fairly close to the archaeologically significant Mansion Inn site. We reported last week that a major trove of artifacts, 3,500 to 4,000 years old, had been found at the former Mansion Inn site after it burned down. Good archaeological practice is to engage an archaeological monitor while any work takes place in such areas to ensure that if anything of importance is uncovered, it's recorded. That's it for our committee reports. Now on to our interview.
And now we turn to John Sachs. John is the lead petitioner of an article for November's special town meeting to build a smaller natural grass field at the Loker area instead of an artificial turf field. John is a resident of the Willowbrook community, directly opposite the Loker site to the south. He and other residents of the surrounding area have been vocal in their concerns about the scope of the article being promoted by the Recreation Commission. They worry about the impact of that project to their homes and the surrounding wetlands, as well as player safety and traffic congestion. We're here to find out more. John, welcome to the Buzz.
Thank you, Rick.
So let's start by having you tell our viewers about you and your neighbors who opposed the recreation plan.
So we actually got involved when one of our residents who was on the Finance Commission sent me an email saying you really need to pay attention to what's going on at a Loker property because it's going to affect us. And so we started attending the meetings of the Recreation Commission, and the PMBC was doing the management of the project. And we listened, and the first concern we had was traffic. Loker is at the intersection of Rice Road and Route 30, and Route 30 is an incredibly congested road, especially at rush hour traffic. You can have a line of traffic from the Rice Road traffic light going all the way back into Weston. That was, when I left today, that was what was happening. And so we looked at it and we realized that everyone who was going to go to the Loker field would be turning left in front of that traffic to get onto the access road. And we figured the access road is very narrow. It's only about wide enough for 2 cars, so there'd be congestion on the access road and congestion on Route 30. So I actually sent a suggestion to the Recreation Commission saying, you know, I think there's something I can suggest to help with the traffic. If you don't allow people to do left turns, then basically you will eliminate this whole problem of backing up. Because we felt that the people making the left turn would end up backing all the way through the Rice Road intersection, the light would change, and you'd have gridlock. And so rather than getting a reaction out of that, we got an official report from Weston and Sampson, the engineering firm, that said the traffic effect of the Loker property was minimal to negligible on the neighborhood area. And quite frankly, nobody, even the audience, when they said it, believed it. None of the residents believed it. I don't think anybody who commutes on Route 30 believes it. And more interestingly, every town employee I talked to who deals with traffic also didn't really believe it. And so we became really concerned because this is like a very obvious problem. And if they're burying a problem like this by doing a traffic study and checking it off, we wondered what else was going on, what else didn't we know about. So that's really how we got involved. And as we got more and more involved, we saw more and more issues of all kinds with the project.
Okay, we'll talk about those. You think that the proposed artificial turf field will be detrimental to the neighborhood. Can you tell us why?
Well, I've already mentioned traffic.
Right.
The other one is they're planning to basically open the fields up till 10 o'clock at night with these enormously large field lights that are these stanchions that are well above the trees, which we'd be able to see from our property. And there'd be noise, it'd be light. And there's also the whole issue of environmental pollution from crumb rubber. Loker has wetlands on it. Those wetlands are actually connected via conduit onto the Willowbrook wetland. So anything that gets dumped in Loker would end up with us. And there's a lot of controversy about crumb rubber and the kinds of pollution it has. So I got help from a professor of analytical chemistry who very kindly did a survey of journal articles that were published of people who did research on the effects of crumb rubber on the environment. And what he found was that rainwater that washes through crumb rubber leaches zinc out at 4 times the levels that EPA allows for aquatic life. So in effect, the water coming out of the drainage system on the local property, which is directly linked ultimately into the wetlands itself, would be dumping, during major storms, would be dumping, quite frankly, toxic water for the aquatic life. So that becomes a real issue. And again, it's directly connected to us, so that same water would come to our property. And then there's the issue of crumb rubber dust. You can see the dust in the high school field. As the field wears out, the crumb rubber turns to dust, and there's plastic particles everywhere. And all of that would also go into the wetlands and local property. So those are the major concerns we have about the neighborhood.
So some people will say that it's a case of NIMBY, not in my backyard, and that's the reason you're opposing this. How do you respond to that?
Well, we're not really opposing a field. We're proposing a grass field as an alternative, which will have less impact on the neighborhood and have a lot fewer other problems, which we can get to in a minute. We really want to propose this as an alternative, as a compromise, because we do want to help with the field shortages in Wayland, but again, we would like to have less of an impact on the neighborhood as well. If we were really NIMBY, we'd send our lawyers out to basically litigate this thing to death for years. And as long as you have the money to spend, which we do, you can just take this through the courts for a very long time, which we thought that was very destructive and not a good way to try to handle the problem.
What do you hope that you're going to be able to accomplish with this petitioner's article?
Well, we saw a very rushed process that was in a somewhat badly designed field structure itself. I mean, you can see it from the public thing. The article had to be pulled twice from town meetings because they tried to rush it through without having design done or even figuring out how much it was going to cost. But that's only the visible part of the planning. There are other issues that we uncovered. And our goal is really to make sure all the town voters understand all of the issues about the field. And one way we did that is, rather than just being negative about the artificial turf field, we proposed a grass field, as we hope was a model of what you could do more rationally with the Loker property, rather than the turf field. And then it's up to the voters to decide what they want to do.
You've told me that the Recreation Commission's plan isn't a good one and they've taken shortcuts. You just mentioned shortcuts. Could you explain more about that?
Well, they're both shortcuts and what I'll call very bad design decisions. I mean, they're rushing to build a project, again, before they knew what the costs were and you know, fully had a design worked out. Even in the notice of intent filed with the Conservation Commission, our attorney found 2 pages of notes on omissions and literally errors and things in the filing itself. And then the Conservation Commission insisted on a peer review, and we're very grateful for them for doing that, of the field design, and the peer reviewer found a lot of problems also with the original design, that if there hadn't been a peer review, we just wouldn't have been caught. So, I mean, one of the problems I can talk about is the catch basin and the drainage system. So when you have a property like Loker with grass and trees, rain falls on it, it gets absorbed into the ground, and basically it gets diffused in the system. But if you build a very, very large field on a property like that, what you're really doing is building a very large water collection system. All of the water that falls on the field goes in drain pipes, which eventually get directed toward a catch basin, which is then also connected into the wetlands. And the peer review found that Weston and Sampson didn't know for sure, because they hadn't done enough tests, to know whether there is at least 2 feet of soil under the catch basin. And you need that because the catch basin is supposed to diffuse the water. You can't have a catch basin that's large enough for any storm. If, for instance, you had a 12-inch rainfall, which is more and more common these days, you would need a catch basin just 3/4 of the size of an Olympic swimming pool to hold that much water. So if there's not enough soil, the water doesn't diffuse from the bottom of the catch basin. It'll overflow and it'll flood, and who knows where the water will go. But we were downhill, so we were concerned about that. And then they built the field, and they wanted to make a very large field. One of the things that's very clear is the Recreation Commission was trying to solve every problem they had with field shortages was this one field. And so they designed a large field, which is larger than the standard soccer field. And what that did is it basically blocked one of the access roads to the Loker property. There are 2 access roads. One is from Rice Road, and one is from Route 30. So the only access available for emergency vehicles is from Route 30 and that narrow access road that I talked about before. And it looks really bad. It's hard to explain without a map, but basically that road is so narrow that if an ambulance goes up it and cars are on it, they literally have to back up the hill around the curve to get out of the way. They can't move to the side because the road is too narrow for that. And then the ambulance has to make this long arcing curve on the 7.5 wide path to the field. They have a little turnaround pad where they can turn around and then go back the other way. And then they also have to fight Route 30 traffic, both ways, because they can't use Rice Road, which should have less traffic issues. And you can't turn an ambulance around the field because the heat of the engine will actually melt the plastic grass. So if you picture the situation, this is at night because they want to play the games at night, and 2 cars are stuck on the road and they see the ambulance and they try to get out of the way. If someone panics, they could have a fender bender accident and they could literally block access to the field from the ambulance. Or worse, you could have somebody walking behind the car, the driver might not see them, they could actually hit them backing up in the dark. So it's a very, very sort of Rube Goldberg, quite perilous emergency vehicle access system. And they did that just to get another 10 yards on the length of the field beyond the size of a standard soccer field. And to me, that's a rush decision that people really haven't thought through the consequences of.
Why would they do such a thing?
You have to ask them that. I honestly don't know. I mean, I looked at it, and when I was designing the grass field, this is the first thing that hit me because I saw the access road and I saw that the field was blocking it. And I thought, why did they do this? And then you look at the emergency access design they had, and it's just awful. Okay. And then the heat issue. Again, if you want a field that you use a lot, you use a turf field. A lot of people do that. But turf fields get to be incredibly hot. They've measured 163 degrees in the high school field. They can get up to 180 degrees in some places. And turf fields are typically 50 to 60 degrees hotter than grass fields right next to them. And there's a lot of information in the press about this, lots of articles in newspapers and magazines about both the danger of the heat and the fact that the fields are really unusable on very sunny summer days because it's all solar heating. It's not the air temperature that causes the heat. And my favorite article that I found was one from USA Today that showed a melted soccer cleat for someone who had actually played on a field in Texas. But the more interesting one for me was one that talked about a women's World Cup soccer game where the air temperature is 120 degrees because they were playing on a turf field. And if you follow women's soccer, you realize that they're absolutely outraged because they have to play on turf fields and men don't. When they played soccer at Foxborough in the World Cup game, they actually literally had to tear up the turf field and put down grass because they wouldn't have been eligible as a venue if they had a turf field. Professional soccer players don't want to play on turf because they think it's dangerous. And so we're asking our kids to play on the field. And it's not just the heat. If you slide across a plastic grass field, it's incredibly abrasive. It'll take your skin right off. I have these pictures in my computer of things that look like medieval torture injuries where these people have whole strips of skin stripped off. Again, professionals don't want to put up with it. Why are we doing it to our kids, quite frankly?
So you think that your petitioner's article is a better article?
Yeah, because we tried to address all of the problems that we saw as best we could. Basically, the first thing is the cost. I mean, it costs half as much, 1.5 million as opposed to 3.1 million for a grass field as opposed to a turf field. Then there's the issue I talked about in the pollution. Grass doesn't pollute the way crumb rubber does. And since the wetlands are right there, I mean, the field literally is in the wetlands buffer zone for the turf field. We felt that was important. We basically mandated a smaller field that's regular soccer field size, and that's because you could use the Loker access road with the design we had, and you didn't have the issue of these sort of Rube Goldberg emergency access mechanisms going on. And finally, we actually put in a sentence that there had to be a traffic mitigation plan along with the property. So we think these things actually make for a much better field proposal than the turf field proposal, which doesn't really address any of these issues.
And do you think that your proposal meets the same objectives or would solve the same problems that the Recreation Commission's field would do?
Well, it doesn't solve everybody's problems, and it can't. It's meant to be a compromise. And when you have a compromise, everybody gets something and nobody gets everything that they want. I mean, quite frankly, we in the neighborhood would rather not have a soccer field, but this guy's proposal would give us a soccer field, but it would have a lot less impact on the neighborhood in terms of traffic and pollution and things like that. And then in exchange for that, the Recreation Commission does get a field to help with the field shortage, but they can't use it, you know, all day and all night, all the time, and have such a major impact on the neighborhood. And that's really the goal of this article, to try to propose a compromise that everybody can live with, perhaps not like, but at least live with. Thank you.
Okay. Well, John, thanks very much for coming in.
Thank you very much for
And
letting me
we'll
come
see
in.
you at town meeting in November, November
Absolutely.
13th.
Yes, thank you.
That's the buzz for this week. Next week, we go to special town meeting. In conjunction with that, we'll be broadcasting an encore of our October 21st program with the selectmen. That was about their vote not to include the high school fields and the Loker field articles in the November special town meeting warrant, their removal of the water metered article, and the procedural problem with the October 2nd marijuana vote. After that, our next broadcast will be on December 2nd. Check our listings at our website. Remember, the Buzz airs on Sundays and Tuesdays at 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. on your public cable channel, Comcast Channel 8 and Verizon Channel 37, and we're online on demand anytime at our website, wacam.tv/buzz. There you'll find an archive of past programs, a schedule of upcoming shows, and links to documents from subjects presented on the shows. And you'll find a transcript of this week's interview along with our committee reports every week in the Town Crier, both in print and online. If you have a town issue you'd like discussed on the Buzz, call us, email us, or use the contact form on the website. Tell us what's on your mind and what you think about the show. I'm your host, Ken Isaacson. On behalf of the entire volunteer crew and guests here at Wayland Weekly Buzz, thank you for watching, and please tell your friends to tune in too.
What's the buzz? Tell me what's happening. 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 What should you want to know?